Hi, I'm Chris.
I'm Bebbo.
And I'm Millsy.
Each week, we're going to unleash the thrill of sporting discourse as we debate some of the hottest topics across the globe.
With insightful analysis, diverse perspectives, and engaging discussions, we strive to entertain and inform as we tug at the fabric of social morality.
We dive into the ultimate court of conversation and feel the friction of mass debated sports. Welcome back, listeners, to the Mass Debated Sports podcast, where if you're listening on Spotify or other podcasting platforms, please hit the follow button and give us a 5-star rating. If you're watching on YouTube, please hit subscribe and like the video, or alternatively, like our Facebook page and engage with our posts. We'll discuss the best comments to our posts during the show, and we promised to try and get your gender correct. Sorry, Dad, for last week's episode. If you know, you know. But before we jump into some good topics this week, I also owe the audience an apology as the podcast is late due to me again. Unfortunately, I have to continue winning some bread for the house by having to work down in Brisbane, and I was flying back to sunny Gladstone last night. So I do apologise. And looking ahead, I'm actually away next week as well. So no doubt the boys will hold the fort, and it'll be better than your standard week because I won't be on it. But yeah, let's jump straight to it then, chaps. We're going to kick off with some AFL, go into a bit of NRL, and gearing up towards Origin, which will be exciting. Then we'll do our normal weekly segment of the Matter Sports Cock of the Week, and we've got some new jingles which we're thrilled to deploy. And then we'll touch upon some cricket and developing into a discussion around players playing for other nationalities in other sports. And then we'll wrap things up with our unsolicited financial advice multi. So we'll start with yourself, Bebbo, and it was a good topic that you brought up earlier in the week, and it's one that always sort of simmers in the background at this time of year. Should AFL have a State of Origin series? So just to wet your whistle, mate, got a few questions just to kick you off. How would it work in your opinion, and sort of how many states would you like to have involved? And then what time of year would also make sense the most for the AFL?
Well, to start off with, I can't believe they haven't made it work yet. Obviously, AFL I think it's the biggest sport in Australia. It probably is the biggest sport in Australia. I'd hate to admit that because I don't really follow it, but it's probably the biggest sport in Australia. Most followed sport in Australia outside of maybe soccer, but we don't classify that as a sport in this country. How they haven't sort of taken the one good thing or the best thing about rugby league, which is State of Origin, and done it themselves is beyond me. And I know they've tried in the past and it hasn't really worked, or they haven't, for some reason, it hasn't worked. They used to have Victoria play South Australia, and I think that was it. But obviously, as the most national sport that we have, that's represented by nearly every state, and when Tasmania comes in, it'll just be the Northern Territory to go. And every sort of person's got a horse in the race then, don't they, across the country? So the State of Origin does become a little bit more difficult than it does in rugby league, where it's just predominantly Queensland, New South Wales. So here's a few stats, and this is from 2023 of registered players that compete in Aussie rules, not professionally, just not professionally, just the local clubs, whatever. So 555,629 people in 2023 played Aussie rules. In Victoria, there was 235,970. Western Australia was 95 and almost a half. New South Wales was 71 and a half almost. South Australia was almost 70,000. Queensland's 60, a bit over 68,000. Tasmania's 14 and a half, which is 14,500 more people than I thought lived in Tasmania. NT's just under 10,000 and ACT's like just over 8,000. So I know that's just a heap of pointless numbers that don't mean much, but if you look at how that correlates to the representation at the AFL level, like the professional level, well, Victoria's got 483, which is 0.2%. in comparison to their registered unprofessional players, I guess you'd say. Western Australia is like 101. Anyhow, it goes on. So Victoria, Western Australia and South Australia and Tasmania, as you'd imagine, all have the highest percentage of unprofessional player to professional player ratio, where states like New South Wales, even though it's got the third highest representation, and Queensland, who's not that far behind, especially per capita, is probably higher per capita of attendance, their percentages are significantly lower, because while kids might play that sport, as kids or whatnot, they may, if they're good enough athletes, go on to play rugby league or rugby union or one of the other more popular sports in the States here. Maybe not union anymore because there's no money in it, but certainly league, because there's a better pathway, potentially more options for them, and a bit of money through it. So I guess what I'm saying is you can't just pick states and say, okay, Victoria plays South Australia and Western Australia plays NT and Queensland plays New South Wales, because of the discrepancy in participation and certainly at that professional level. So I think there's three ways they could go about this. One, you have Victoria, who have essentially half of the players in the league are Victorians. You have them that play the rest of Australia. So 483 versus 319 from the Australian team. Personally, I don't like the sound of that, especially when the participation numbers in Queensland, New South Wales are going to continue to swell as the population gets bigger, like their higher growth areas. So in a couple of decades' time, you're sort of setting yourself up for that to be very, very uneven the other way. You could then go Victoria. Oh, sorry. You could leave Queensland play New South Wales, build on the established hatred that the NRL's already, or the rugby league's already brought up, and then have Victoria, Tasmania combined play against South Australia, Western Australia, NT. They would then play two parallel games, obviously, two parallel series. You'd get 6 Origin games as opposed to 3 in rugby league. That might work. My personal favourite would be just to go a tri-series like they had in the Rugby League Super League back in 97. So you would have Victoria and Tasmania, who currently have 506 players in the AFL. South Australia, Western Australia's only got 202. And then a Queensland, New South Wales, Northern Territory, obviously ACT's part of New South Wales, Northern Territory team, which counts for 117 AFL players. Obviously, they'd be the underdogs. You play a tri-series sort of system. Not only do you get the 3 games when they play each other once, you then get a 4th game of the series, which is the final. And the thing that it has on rugby league is there always would be a decider. They had that in Super League, didn't matter. 1 played 2 at the end of the round robin competition in the final, so there's always a decider. And like we had in rugby league last year, the 3rd game, it's still an Origin. You still watch it, but you're certainly not as invested in it because the series is already over. So what's your thoughts, Chris? Do you like any of those scenarios, or do you think that's just a heap of bullshit?
No, basically what your notes there are what I had in terms of how they should map it out. But I actually like the other way. I think that so firstly, I think go back to what you said first in terms of Victoria versus South Australia. If you look at State of Origin and you look at the origin of it, that's where it first came from. That was the game that was first played. So in terms of sticking with tradition, I think they should go back to that. But I'm also not adverse to the other thing you mentioned around Victoria versus like a Barbarians type team. That's one of the notes that I had. I think that when you stack, obviously the Victorian team would be so stacked, but I think versus the Barbarians team, it would potentially even it out. I think having like a round robin type thing with Queensland and New South Wales, I also had there Queensland could play New South Wales and Victoria could play South Australia, and then the winner could play. I think bringing other states into it, which don't necessarily have the players to support it, Northern Territory, Tasmania, the minnow teams, or the minnow states rather, I just don't think that would work. So my 2 things are, you go back to the true Origin game, Victoria versus South Australia, or you play Victoria versus the Barbarians. Another thing for me is, again, to throw some useless stats in there, when we look at why, the rugby league state of origin, as we know, is such a huge success. Why they're not gone back to it? When you look at the rugby league state of origin in 2023, Game One had 3.48 million viewers, and that's compared to the AFL Grand Final, which had 3.06. So that's the premier event in the AFL versus one game in rugby league. So I think that there is room there to play. Definitely bring back Origin and sort of gain those numbers because they're going to get the support for it. Definitely, it'll stack up.
So I've got I think what you propose is pretty good, Bebbo, and Chris basically aligns to it as well. I had a think and other ways that you could do it. I question this one, and I don't think it would work because it would be tricky to maintain. But you could almost split the league in half for each team. So, for example, you could take the biggest rivalries. Brisbane Gold Coast isn't one of the biggest rivalries, but it's a geographical rivalry, and then players playing for Brisbane would get selected for one half of the AFL team, and vice versa. The only difficulty thing with that, if one player transitioned from one team to the other team in a season, does that mean they then become eligible? And it's not really an origin thing; that's just who you're playing for, which becomes a bit of like an NBA All-Star game.
Which are fucking jokes. Like,
exactly.
The American system in ice hockey, NBA, NFL, terrible. Absolute waste of fucking time. Like,
it's almost like the Maori indigenous game in NRL. It's becoming a bit of a joke. Players pull out.
But at least that's still physical. At least they still can be physical. Like, you watch an NFL All-Stars game, mate, it's flag football without the flags. Like, they're not even the defenders don't even try and cover people. Like, I don't want to get myself injured because I'll lose some money off my contract. So
and that's sort of the risk. But I think that's kind of the risk that AFL see is they don't have to necessarily go out and get the reward because they've already got that. I know they were only 500,000 off, which is quite a considerable number. But if you look at the stats and the average attendances like we were before this recording, Bebbo, of total attendances at stadia and all that stuff during the season, they're like 10th on the global list, and that's because they play most of the games at the MCG and they pack it out every week because every team is basically home there, so it's always like continuous Magic weekend. But if they wanted to grow the game, they don't obviously have an international game, like much like NFL and stuff like that. They don't have other nations that play it. But I think it's quite important to have that if they wanted to grow the game and give the fans the opportunity to see the very best play against the very best. Because if you have, your grand final, which first team plays second team typically, depending on how they get there. Yes, you've got the two best teams, but they're not the best players because there'll be a player down in the bottom team that would make one of the best teams in Australia or whatever. I would actually like to see somehow. If you took this moment in time, the best way to do it, in my opinion, is Victoria versus rest of the world, is how I do it. The only issue I've got with that is how do you get people in rest of the world, the fans especially, to get behind it and feel sort of passion and connection to the team? Because the reason that we love Queensland and New South Wales Origin is because if you're from Queensland or you're from New South Wales, you have a genuine connection to where you're from. Whereas if you do rest of the world, you kind of lose that a bit. But I've been assured by some AFL nuts that I speak to in the office that there's enough hatred there for Victoria in AFL that would not be an issue. So,
I honestly think that too. That's why I don't like that idea. It was the first one through out, but I personally don't like it because you've got two options. You've got outcomes there. You've got Australian Mexicans beating their chest because they won the series and they're the best at AFL, a game they created that no one else really cares about except for heaps of Australians. Or you've got the rest of Australia who are going to be like that All-Stars team that you just talked about, like an East-West. Where's the passion from? Where does Tasmania come into this? They've got to literally go past Victoria to join the rest of Australia, as far as I'm concerned. That's why I like the Tri-Series. So you've got Victoria, they're going to sprinkle in a few Tasmanians. It's like their ugly stepsister that they've just got to take to the prom or something, South Australia retain themselves, but they get boosted by Western Australia to make them stronger to compete with Victoria. So you've got that original rivalry, like Chris talked about, South Australia-Victoria rivalry. And then you've got the full underdog team. Queensland, New South Wales would have to unite, which, could be a storyline itself, especially if it's played at the time of the year that Origin is in rugby league. And then you throw in NT, who are just Queenslanders with stricter drinking laws. So they're the full underdog team. So you kind of get passion. I feel like those three conglomerates could be passionate about those teams. I would watch a system like that, where I don't think I'd ever tune in to watch Victoria play the rest of Australia.
Yeah.
I really wouldn't. So, but look, we'll move on from that. When would you think it would be played? Because obviously mid-season, they've been talking about maybe playing a preseason comp. Now that's stupid because one, you don't know who the best players are that year. You've got guys that will just come back just in time for the season from their surgery, all sorts of things like that. And I think that history in sports has shown over the years, no one really gives a fuck about a preseason competition. It will never be treated like a serious competition if it's played prior to a season. You almost need proper competition to get that competitive juices flowing, in players. So I also don't think you play it mid-season, though.
Yeah.
Like the clubs have showed that they, or have expressed that they have no interest in getting their players injured mid-season. I think that if they put it at the end of the season, and I know I would not agree with this in rugby league. I know we had to do it during the COVID years, but I would hate to see it go to the end of the season. I love it in the middle of the season. If AFL put this at the end of the season, the clubs, well, their quest for a premiership was either successful or it wasn't, or they're the other 19 teams, But regardless, they can let their players go for 4 weeks, for a month to go play in this competition. Every major sport in Australia has wrapped up with a gap before the next sport starts. You would have the monopoly of broadcasting time slots running 3 to 4 weeks of games at this point in time through October, early November. There's nothing else to watch. NFL's kicked off, but it's on a fucking Monday in Australia. So what else is there to watch? Nothing. No one watches cricket.
No.
What's your thought? Do you agree with that? End of season, or do you think mid-season could go?
I've got a foot in each camp, to be honest. I think, you mentioned rugby league and you wouldn't change it. I mean, why is it so good in rugby league? It works during that time frame. Like we had it, as you mentioned, during COVID, and I don't think it was as good. So I also think some other pros for doing it.
They don't have to compete with rugby league this way. If they don't do it during the middle of the season, they don't have to compete with rugby league. You've talked about how game one was bigger audience than the AFL Grand Final.
Yeah.
Now they don't have to compete with that. They literally get a month for themselves of TV rights.
They won't be competing with them because they wouldn't play it on a Wednesday for a start. So they'll probably play it on the weekend, or you know what I mean. They'd probably play it during the bye rounds or something like that. Like they could look to change the schedule for it. But I think like having a mid-season, for me, the players are at their fittest. There's less likely of players being missing due to injury. Like you get towards the end of the year, players start breaking down. They're fatigued. To your point, not every team's going to play finals footy, and a lot of those players who are in the bottom sort of teams aren't necessarily going to be selected anyway. But I just think you get towards the end of the year, and the players are going to be broken down, fatigued, and I don't think you're necessarily going to get the best product. So, and you talk about competing against rugby league. Are they really going to compete? If they put it on at the same time as rugby league, you're going to get your AFL players watching it. You're going to get your NRL players watching the State of Origin. You're not going to get this cross-pollination of it. You know what I mean? I think where you would lose viewership is if you got to game 3, hypothetically speaking, if all 3 games were on the exact same night and then you got to game 3 in one series and it was a dead rubber, you'd probably lose viewership to the other one if it was all tied up. That's the only way I
think
see
both.
it.
I think rugby league would lose viewers to AFL. I'm not saying that it would get outbeaten by AFL if they played the same time slot, but they would certainly lose viewers because a lot of AFL viewers would watch State of Origin purely because it's sport on a Wednesday night. But if the AFL was on the same night, you're just going to be sharing viewers. Is my point. Why share viewers when you can literally just have the same? I mean, you're sharing viewers, but why split viewers on the one night when you can share viewers on different time slots? That's my point. Why can't both codes have 3.5 million people watching those games as opposed to 2 million and 1.5 or something like that?
Well, the argument for having it during the same period as like when NRL do it is they've got it right. And like we said at the start, if you have it at a preseason period, or if you have it like the NFL or American sports differently, are you going to get the same level of engagement from the players? Like how would you incentivize it? Would you have financial incentives, or would you have punishments for not turning up and performing? But then how do you manage that? Because it's going to be difficult if you're adding more games to the season. There's already, and we're going to get onto it about injuries and stuff like that in NRL, and I'm sure it's happening in AFL as well. But, games are getting faster, players are getting bigger. There's more moving parts, more momentum on the pitch, and that get absorbed by the human body, which is only capable of so much. Like, you're going to have higher injury risks if you increase numbers of games. And as we've discussed previously, the most important thing about sport is player welfare, not the finances, of course. So, Chris, how would you try and incentivize the players to actually perform, like financial or carrot or stick method?
Are you talking for an Origin type series?
Yeah,
I think. Well, look, at the end of the day, I think it depends what it goes back to. Like, if you look at rugby league, right? It's the pride in the jersey. So you could pay those players $0, and they would still want to play and turn up and play for the jersey.
Ooh, not half of New South Wales.
You don't reckon?
I just don't get it.
Ola Kawatu 2 years ago tweeted saying, "I've been a Maroon from the start," and here he is playing for New South Wales. You got Luke Keary, who was born in Ipswich and was adamant he would never play for New South Wales and was only ever eligible for Queensland. And when they said, no, you can't play for Queensland, he went, oh, okay, I'll play for New South Wales. So, yes, it's 100% about the money. That's for a lot of those Blues down there. Do you think that if there was no money on the line, Jerome Luai would put his hand up to play Origin?
No.
Fuck no. He's just more interested in playing for Tonga. Oh, sorry, Samoa.
Yeah, good point. And I suppose you're right. They've got to look after where their bread and butter comes from in their main contract. Because if they get injured during that game, they're out for the rest of the season. I suppose. Look, I don't know enough about NRL contracts, and I would assume that they would have something in the contract to say, if I am selected for a representative side, they probably get an upswing in their contract anyway. But conversely, if they get injured for that, then it's not. There's no knock-on or flow-on effect. So
they get match payments for Origin.
For playing Origin,
and they will get suspended if they refuse to play Origin for no good reason.
A good way of incentivizing it for me is if your player gets selected, you actually get an increase in your salary cap for next season. If that, and
like
that would incentivize. Yeah. The club gets a bonus for extra room in their salary cap, so it's an incentive to get your players playing. And if the players come from that team and they don't perform, then they won't get selected, because it will be a stigma if you get selected. If you're from the Roosters, for example, the Roosters players don't perform. That you incentivize the clubs to get behind it as well and encourage them to go on board, because they would get an extra 200K in their salary cap for next season.
Does that make the rich richer though? Because if you've got a good club and you've got a heap of players selected, and then all of a sudden you've got more salary, it's kind of you're kind of making the rich richer and the poor poorer. So that idea was endorsed by the Australian government.
Yeah, nice. It took me a second to comprehend that one, but no. You probably would get that scenario, but I think you need to incentivize it somehow to get it off the ground in AFL, and don't make it too similar to NRL, because you want to have some sort of separation, but you still want to see the best against the best.
Well, the money's good, like in terms of the revenue generation from it. So Origin for the series generation for revenue generation for Origin in 2023 was $70 million to the NRL. So if you look at that for the AFL and assume similar type numbers, and then, to your point, Millsy, around sharing some of that back to the clubs. But, I've got to take Bebbo's comment on board. You can't just continue to make the other clubs stronger, because you'll just get to that. It's kind of what happened in the EPL, right? Where for so long you just had all the top teams, all the top flight teams, just no one was looking. You know what I mean? And you don't want to get like that with the NRL or the AFL, because that's what's kept it so interesting.
Maybe you could stagger it. So say if you're at the top of the league and you get a player selected, you get 100k in your salary. If you're at the bottom of the league, you get $1 million extra in your cap or something like that. You could layer it. But then that might incentivize other actions. There's always this saying, show me the...
If you've got a surefire guy to get picked, though, at the end of the season, you're just going to start tanking games, aren't you? Like, this is going to be better for us next year. Like, we should see with draft picks.
That happens in the NFL, doesn't it?
They already do a draft, so there's already that prospect of them doing that anyway. But you see it in basketball and NFL and that, and they start tanking for picks. I don't like that. I don't like any system where you get rewarded for actively being shitter than you should be. Yeah. Fair enough if you're just shit and you're trying your best. That's what it is. You need a leg up somehow. But those systems that reward you for...
don't necessarily work.
For going out there, it's horrible for the spectacle. Like, it's horrible for the sport.
Yeah. Well, anyway, let's move on and talking best against the best. Let's talk about the Eels versus the Bulldogs. No, I'm joking. Let's talk about NRL Origin. It's up and coming. So teams have been announced throughout the weekend just gone and Monday morning. Let's start with some big news, and we'll go to you, Chris, on David. Sorry, I can. Given that much of a shock, I can't even say it. David Fifita is out of the Queensland team. You two are just lucky I wasn't recording before the conversation we went on live. But
are we really?
God, I'm gonna not miss being here next week. David Fifita not being in the Queensland team, Chris. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, look, I think obviously it was a pretty big shock because I had him on my side and I thought he would get selected. Obviously, probably like 90% of Queensland. I get the rationale. Like, I understand why Billy Slater's doing it. But I think at the end of the day, if you look at experience, you look at how he plays in Origin, like, he grows another leg when he plays Origin. And so I just think the experience and the fact he's been there, I know he's not – on the weekend he didn't play too bad, and I know that the Titans are sort of struggling prior to the weekend. They've started to actually turn it a bit of a corner, to be honest. But I just think, I understand why they've done it, but why Billy Slater's done it. But, I would have had him in my team.
Yeah, and I'm assuming you're the same, Bebbo, based on the messages from the group chat.
Oh, no, not at all. No, I'm not the same because I don't understand why he's done it. I don't understand the rationale. Saying, he hasn't hit the high expectations that he set for himself standards, that he set for himself is ridiculous because even his low standards shit all over the top of most other edge forwards' high standards. So he is easily one of the best edge forwards in the comp this year, even not playing that well as Billy Slater's saying it. So
let me play devil's advocate, though. Let me play devil's advocate. So doesn't pick him for game one, gets a rocket up him, then you watch him come out these next couple of weeks and absolutely turn it on. And I bet you
how important's game one, though? How important is game one? You can't sit there and go, we'll make him better for game two. You lose game one where you're pushing shit uphill.
Especially down there. Yeah. Yeah, but one player doesn't make a series two. You know what I mean?
No, but one player can win you a game. Yeah. One player can be the difference to win you a game.
I'm in your camp. I think you should have been selected, but I can understand the rationale for it because if you watch, I guarantee you he gets picked for game 2 and game 3.
Well, okay. Well, they don't pick him, but they pick Selwyn Cobbo, who don't get me wrong, Selwyn Cobbo should be in the team, but he should be in the back line, not on the bench at 17. What is Selwyn Cobbo going to offer from the bench that's going to be worthy to the team? Yeah, I know he said, we lost the outside back 4 of the last 6 games, of the last 2 series. So we're putting an outside back on the bench. But they've got Jeremiah Nane, who can play in the centres.
Correct.
It's right. He's athletic enough. You don't need to just put a fucking centre on the bench in the case, especially when that guy, who here thinks that Selwyn Cobbo can actually roll up his sleeves and play 25 minutes as a lock or an edge forward? I don't. I don't think he's physical enough. He's big enough, but I don't think he's physical enough. He's that sort of like physicality usually comes with maturity, and he's still pretty fucking young in rugby league terms. So I just don't understand why Cobbo is at 17 for that role when you could literally put Fifita at 17, and if you lose an outside back, well, Nane goes to centre. They'll go to the wing if you need. So Hammer goes to fullback. You know what I mean? Like there's enough movement there in that team already that you've still got David Fifita, who honestly should be in that fucking team. Easily should be in that team. And the other thing I don't understand, and we'll talk about, I guess, jump over you here, Millsy, comments online. So on Facebook, we had a few people say, oh, you don't understand, they're picking Brendan Piakura just for the experience of being in Maroons camp and getting him ready for a Maroons spot. Well,
disagree.
I hate to break it to everybody, but Brendan Piakura is lucky to keep his fucking Broncos jersey each week, let alone be even remotely in line for a Queensland jersey. Hylam Lukey, Max Plath, Bo Firma, and Jamal Shibasaki, who hasn't even fucking debuted in the NRL yet, will play for Queensland before Brendan Piakura ever will. So it's just a waste of fucking time bringing this clown into training camp so that he can, learn the game structure and all this shit to not play and never get picked again. Like, I hate to second guess Billy.
Yeah, I was about to say, but Billy we trust though.
Fuck me. You know what? In Billy, I hate that saying because, you know who used to say that? New South Wales used to say, in Freddie we trust. And guess who did a marvellous stint in his first couple of years as New South Wales coach? Freddie Fitler. And then he started picking stupid shit like Stephen Crichton on the bench and Dylan Walker on the bench. So let's hope that he's not going down that same fucking avenue here. But I really fucking hate the fact that Fifita's not in this team and that Piakura is even fucking mentioned in that 17, that 20, sorry.
Yeah. No, I think we agree Fifita should be in there. So just sort of transitioning from Origin into NRL matches, and we're going to discuss Matt Burton here. So it's something that I picked up on another grassroots podcast, NRL 360, and the Bulldogs are requesting Matt Burton back this weekend. So I see you nodding there, Chris. What's your opinion on this? Do you think he should be allowed to go back and play for the Bulldogs? I mean, the Bulldogs are pushing for a spot at the end of the season. If they're 2 points short, are they going to look at this? Like, how do you sit on this?
I think that I think if he can go back and play, he should. I mean, the Dogs are going to need him this weekend because I think without Burton, without Crichton, I think they're going to struggle. And like you mentioned, they are on the fringe of the 8. And I think if they don't, like a lot of teams, look at the Cowboys, like, mate, they're absolutely no hope this weekend with the amount of talent they've got out. So I think if he's allowed to go back and play, he should go back and play. Or if he wants to go back and play, should go back and play because they're going to need him because they're in all sorts without him. So, yeah, I think you should be able to.
I saw you shaking your head there, Bebbo.
Nah,
I'm going to enjoy this.
Because it's ridiculous. No, it's ridiculous. They need him. Yes, they need him. But every team needs the players they're missing. The game with HIAs and that, and the amount of activations of an 18th man, which never used to exist, means that the 18th man is part of the game day squad. Whether he plays, whether he becomes active or not, he is part of the game day squad. He is not eligible. There's been fucking how many years of Origin? Almost 40 years of Origin. 35 years of Origin where 18th man hasn't been able to play for their club and will never even fucking wear a jersey on game day. So the fact that the Bulldogs are crying like little bitches is fucking amazing to me because it's been happening forever and they feel like, oh, they're so hard. We're so hard done by. How dare they take Matt Burton? Well, do you think that Wayne Bennett doesn't want Felice Kafusi in his fucking squad this week too? You know, it's just fucking stupid. Shut your fucking mouth, Phil Gould.
I think they should make a dispensation for the 18th man though, because to your point, they never ever get on the field. So at least make a dispensation for him and allow him to play if they want to play. Like it should come down to the player. If the player, look at them come out the other side of Origin. So they'll play Origin. Players will play Origin on a Wednesday night and then back up for their club on a Friday, Saturday, Sunday game. So to go the other way, what difference does it make?
Origin made $70 million, you just said, mate, last year. $70 million. Fuck the clubs. Fuck 1 week of football. Like Matt Burton, if he goes and plays this week and gets injured, then they've lost their 18th man. They've lost their 18th man, right? Yeah. If he plays 80 minutes, gets a bit banged up, and let's say Stephen Crichton gets head-high'd 5 minutes into Origin 1, fails his HIA, they get to activate their 18th man if the guy gets put on report. There you go, Matt Burton, you're going to the centres, and he's fucking fatigued 20 minutes into that game because he's fucking burnt out from playing over the weekend.
But to your point, it's never happened.
Yeah, sick. That's great. I guess you should go tell all mine safety inspectors that they don't need to worry about doing their checks either, because that shit never happens.
Well, I think with the nature of head injuries and stuff, it's getting a lot. Yeah, well, it's getting a lot more prominent, isn't it? So it's bound to happen eventually. It's gonna.
I just don't understand why it's news. It's been happening for fucking ever.
But it comes
3.5 decades.
The question was, do you think Matt Burton, not should the Bulldogs, do you think Matt Burton should go back and play? And I said that if he wants to play, and he think he could, it comes down to, can he back up? That's what it comes down to. Like, if he gets banged up, the only thing that's going to happen to him is he's going to get a major injury, or he's going to get a head knock himself. So it's actually probably the opposite way, that he's probably going to get an injury in there and then go back and not be able to perform his 18th minute.
Do you think it's would be selfish, though, if they allowed him to do that and he said, yeah, I'm going to go back and play? Because if he does get injured,
for him to be in, isn't it?
He literally takes, like, he puts the whole team structure, the whole plan that the coach has set out in place under jeopardy for him to go selfishly play one game for his club.
Yeah.
Well, everyone else is going to sit out their club game. Everyone else is going to sit out their club game.
Do you reckon it would happen if it was the other way around? Queensland? Like, if it was a Queensland player getting requested to get called back, play for, I don't know, their team, do you reckon the Queensland player would even entertain that thought? Even the possibility of playing for Queensland as the 18th man? I don't think it would.
Wouldn't even be brought up.
Exactly. So I think it's a bit interesting that it's just the New South Wales, based upon what we've alluded to already on this podcast, with the money, and if that wasn't there, would some of the New South Wales players be playing for them? Possibly not. But yeah, no. Without wanting to exercise the point too much, we'll actually transition into injuries in the club game now, and developing into a bit of salary cap chat. So I've just got some stats here, because it seems as though every week there's a multitude of players that get injured, and it's really, really difficult to find stats or recent stats on this other than hearsay from just useless TikTok sources. So I had to do quite a bit of digging. Every year, the NRL does commission a company to do a report on injuries, looking at what limb, what muscle, sort of what outage they had, and all that stuff. But they don't release it publicly for a few years after that season, so we don't really have any recent up-to-date one. The most recent report I could find on the internet was from 2019, and it was a 30-page report. So I've compiled a few numbers here. So seasons 2019, 2022, and 2023, and I've excluded 2020 and 2021 because they're the COVID-affected years. So COVID was a thing when players were getting stood down, so that sort of tainted the injuries a bit. So those 3 years, they had 12 to 13 injuries per week. The COVID-affected years of 2020 and 2021, 15 injuries per week, and you can write off two or three of those a week due to COVID. And then 2024 up until round 10, just gone, it was about 13.3 injuries per week. So as you can see, okay, maybe it's up slightly, but it's not a significant increase. However, what is interesting, as of round 6 in this year's NRL, a fifth of the top 30 squad members, every team, were sidelined. And that's never been done before. So even though injuries are not necessarily increasing at a rate that we think they are, they're happening to bigger players. And that's having a bit of a knock-on effect, obviously, with percentage of salary caps not playing. And you hear about them more in the media, hence them being more prominent in your mind. And another interesting stat, which I just wanted to bring out because all this research I did is worth sharing. And it's quite pivotal, I think, in the success of the Panthers. Since 2020, can you guess the only team to have less injuries, major injuries, that is, in which a major injury is 5+ weeks out? I'll go you, Bebbo. Can you guess the team which is less injuries than that? It's quite obvious when you think about
Panthers?
it. No. It's the Dolphins. And they've only been around for 1.5 seasons.
Oh, right.
It's the only team. And the Dolphins have had 7 major injuries. The Panthers, who have played another 2.5 seasons nearly than the Dolphins, have only had 19 major injuries. And the average for the league is 32.1, with the Roosters being on a whopping 53. So, with their ability to keep consistent and not have major injuries, maybe that's what are they putting in the water there? But they're keeping their players well out of injuries.
Does those stats include like people ruled out from concussions though?
Yes, yeah. Any injury which is 5+ weeks, and
Okay.
but the stats before
5+ weeks.
Yeah, but the injuries per week, but injuries per week stat where it's 12 to 13, that includes every single injury. So if they can't play a match, so
I was going to say because Luke Keary would have been 37 of those for concussions over the last 3 seasons.
So yeah, I'll go to you, Chris. But ultimately, the numbers suggest that the injuries are not increasing that much. They are increasing, but not massively. The injuries are happening to bigger name players. So if you were a manager of a team, would this information sway how you spend your salary cap? Would you look to not be so frugal on one player and try and spread your money across? Like, would you buy a Caitlin Ponga for 1.5 mil? Would you look to buy 2 players for 800 and 700k respectively?
No, I wouldn't, because at the end of the day, you're still in the lap of the gods, right? Regardless of what you do. So you've got to play for the conditions ahead, not for what ifs. So I wouldn't be changing how I built my roster, and like I've said in the past, I would put a huge amount into the junior program and look at what the Panthers have done, look at what the Dogs are doing. So I look at that in terms of bringing that through and getting players on the cheap. But no, I think I largely would just do it how I would do it for every other week or every other year. There's no point planning for what ifs. Interestingly, one of the things that, on the injury thing as well, there's been a huge amount. I think it was on, might have been on the Matty John show or one of those shows. They were talking about one of the big injuries that the players have been having in both the NRL and the AFL is hamstring and calf injuries, and they actually put it down to the increased rain and things like that on the field and the
slipping
ability, or the abilities to get traction off the mark and things like that. So they reckon there's an increased wear on the players' calves and hammies and things like that. So that's one of the top injuries across the AFL and the NRL.
I think also that they're trying to speed up the game. You know what they did with the goal line dropout. It's no longer a penalty. You sort of play the ball. You can't take the 2 points from that. They're trying to speed up the game, and yes, speeding up the game is great, but it's already a pretty exciting, great game. Like, why have you got to keep changing it? And there was actually a spike in 2016, 2015, I think, where ACL injuries were double what they are now, and that's reduced. So maybe the injuries are not now ACLs, and they're looking at those sorts of things, and then it's going to do a bit of
There's a lot of hip dropping going on.
That's a great point. So yeah, well, there's so much hip dropping going on now, which isn't even a hip drop. So, but Bebbo,
that'll be the thing for next year. That'll be the thing for next year. They'll be looking at hammy, something related to do with hammy. So,
So how do those numbers sit with you, Bebbo? What's your general feelings around them, and would that influence any decisions you'd make if you owned a team roster?
Well, no, I'm with Chris. It wouldn't, because those key players win you premierships, or they get you over the line. There is teams that are too top heavy, I guess you could say, and if certain players go down, they're fucked, right? But the main reason clubs get themselves into trouble is not overpaying good talent, it's overpaying mid-tier talent. So if you're good at identifying young prospects, you can develop people on cheap deals like Penrith have, Melbourne have for so long. Like, you're going to go all right. You're going to lose a player, but you've got someone good enough to step up into your system. You've demanded enough from the bottom of your roster as much as the top, as opposed to the teams that, like Parramatta's a good example right this year. They've done fuck all in player development for so long. They haven't recruited that well lately. They've retained certain people. They've lost certain people, but they've paid all this money to two halves. And I think we can all agree, well, I hope we all agree, that Dylan Brown's proven he's not worth the money that they've paid him. So
Not yet.
No, I think he's proven right now that he isn't worth it, because he's just had 6 to 8 weeks to prove that he can run a team by himself, and he's done fuck all. You look at Jerome Luai on the complete flip side, and he's excelled with the task ahead of him. Even Daniel Atkinson the other week, not obviously against the Panthers last week, but the other week when they lost Nico early in that game, or prior to kickoff, Daniel Atkinson stepped up and he had the fucking game of his life. You know, It's all about developing young talent. It's about getting guys on good, cheap deals. Look at the Storm. You got 2 back rows at the Storm, Eli Katoa and Sean Bloor, who both showed they were good football players for their previous clubs, like the Warriors and the Tigers, who were too fucking stupid to know the talent that they had there and the value that was in that player. And because they had a couple of bad games or they had a bad run with injuries, they cut bait with them. Instead of pushing through and going, we've got a gem here and we can have him at good value, you've got Melbourne to just jump in and go, fucking yoink, thank you very much. You've just reinvigorated our forward pack, which had nothing prior to their arrival.
But those
Kurt
top
Capewell,
teams, but those top
Paul
teams do
Alamotti,
that, right?
Well, yeah,
Like you mentioned, the
well,
Storm,
well, that's
the
why
Panthers,
they're top.
they're good at,
That's why
yeah,
they're top.
but that's right. They're good at identifying talent, and they're great at
Yep.
nurturing that talent. You know, and that goes to the coaches and the culture they got at the club. You know, so yeah, I agree with you there. Like Katoa, like when Eli Katoa left the Warriors, I was gutted. And on Dylan Brown, there's talk that he's going to the Warriors too, apparently. So there you go.
What a shit move. That'd be a shit move by the Warriors. But like even
Correct.
Penrith, okay, before or the start of their ascension, picked up Kurt Capewell from the Sharks, who just couldn't find a first grade spot in second row, right? He was a bit of a Mr. Fix-It there at the Sharks. Goes over to Penrith, gets a full-time gig at second row. Everybody that's seen him play knew he could play. He wins a premiership with them. They pick up Paul Alamotti from Canterbury because, he had a rough defensive year in a team that fucking leaked points all over the park anyway. So they get rid of who was touted to be the next biggest fucking centre coming through New South Wales. And Canterbury just cut bait with him because he has one bit rough year when he's fucking 18 years of age. He'll go to Penrith. He'll stay there for the next 6 years. Probably play fucking Origin in full. You know, the reason. So no injuries. I guess long story short, injuries do not sway me in that theory. You shouldn't not pay Kalen Ponga what he's worth. You shouldn't not pay Reece Walsh or Nathan Cleary what they're fucking worth, because they will win you a fucking premiership. You need to find players behind them that will win you games when they're not available. So that's as simple as it is. Don't pick up Josh Adokar on fucking $800,000 when you don't have a spine. Don't pick up Nick Kotrich for $650,000 when you don't have a spine. Don't buy Moses and buy Josh Reynolds at the back end of their career for fucking high money. You know what I mean? That's just dumb shit. It really is just completely fucking stupid. And the Dolphins are a great example of how to build a club. Yeah. And I know they had the benefit of being able to sit back, zero blank canvas and paint what they wanted to there. You know, not Mr. Squiggle it and try and fix what was already given to them. But they missed out on big names like Munster, Ponga, Grant, the Hectic Cheese, you know.
They didn't chase them though, did they? They were strategic.
They did chase them. They did, but chase
not to the end of the world. They didn't.
I don't know. I'm pretty sure. I heard they were going to give Kalen Ponga some sort of record money that he chose to stay at Newcastle instead, right? So they swung and they missed, but when they missed, they didn't panic buy. They didn't buy Luke Brooks, you know, and players like that. They're just proven fucking losers. They went, okay, we didn't get what we want. Let's pay someone well cheaper and we'll just develop it.
But that goes back to the value of the coach too, right? And paying and getting a good head coach.
Recruitment.
And so you got Wayne Bennett and you got Bellamy and you've got Cleary, you know, so it's all a symbiotic relationship with all of that, you know.
Yeah. Well, I think that's covered off NRL for this week. And as I play this week's jingle, Bebbo, get ready for the winners of last week's massive sports cock of the week. But here it is.
New sponsor.
Short and sweet.
Oh,
Thank
new
you, the
sponsor.
unofficial EA Sports.
Righto. So, massive sports cock of the week for episode 9. The Knox Football Netball Club came in bronze medal with only 20% of the votes.
Yeah.
Sheena Shabra, the vegan activist who wanted meat-free sausages at the sausage sizzle after practices, got 40%. And tied with her on top of the podium was Tyson Fury for celebrating a win he didn't win. Bit weak.
Well, there we go.
Bit weak, Millsy. Did you call in friends to vote for Tyson or what?
And it's the first week I haven't actually voted for my own one. I didn't vote at all this week. So, maybe it's,
it was probably your dad probably created a heap of fake accounts and voted for him just because I upset him.
Probably. Keep it going, Dad. I'm loving those wins. Very good. All right, then. So we'll start with your nomination for this week's Massive Sports Cock of the Week, Chris. Who are you dishing out?
This week I have I don't actually have the teams, but it was an incident that happened down at Wentworth Park Oval. It was in the OzTag at Wentworth Park Oval in Glebe, New South Wales, and there was a bit of a punch on there. It was quite. If you catch it, it's doing the rounds. It's on. I think it's on Fox Sports, and it's on. It's all over Instagram and that. But and I think because Bill Harrigan is the president of OzTag now, and so he came out and basically sort of said this is pretty disgusting. But yeah, the incident was a gentleman down there was basically king hit. Like the footage is pretty brutal, but it actually looks like two guys. But you see one of the guys who's filming it sort of having a shot at the other guy saying, "Why don't you go back to the UFC?" And old mate walks out and just basically KOs him. So, my massive sports cock of the week goes out to that gentleman. Mate, it's fucking OzTag. Just like, Jesus Christ.
It's fucking weird, eh? Because over the years of playing touch, OzTag, and obviously rugby league, mate, I've been in more fights or seen more fights in fucking social touch than I've ever seen in rugby league.
Yeah,
so,
competitive sport.
Fucking people take it too serious.
Yeah.
All right, well, I've gone to America and picked former Boston Red Sox pitcher in the Major League Baseball, Austin Maddox, who this past week was arrested in the US during a 5-day police operation called Valiant Nights. What a great name. Sounds like a IPL team. At which time he was arriving at a location where believed he was meeting a 14-year-old girl for sexual encounters. Now, of course, he's denied his innocence, regardless of all of the evidence and the chat, the online
He's denied his innocence.
search. Yeah, but look, when you're stupid enough to not know how they catch pieces of shit like you, even though there's a whole show called Catch a Predator, and you're a mentally ill waste of oxygen that likes to fuck kids, then you're probably delusional enough to think that you are innocent. So, look, I hope his cock gets cut off and sewn inside his own asshole. Sad excuse for a human being, and my nomination this week.
Well, that's they're mind boggles, eh? But yeah, so I'll change the tone a little bit and try and bring some humor, as the Americans say. We're back into this, but I've gone for the Canadian cricket team, or better known as I'm labelling them, the Tier 2 version of Pakistan, after this debacle. So, Canadian cricket, who after being led by their coach to the first World Cup in 21 years, fired their coach 5 days ago, which is only a few days before the World Cup starts, only to rehire him a couple of days later because the person that fired him didn't actually have the authority to do so. That's just so Pakistan.
Only in Canada.
It's so good. Just apologise and brought him back on, basically. Which I had to double take when I read that. I actually heard it on another podcast before, and then I did some research. And yeah, it's true. So, Canadian cricket, that's just too good to not go unnoticed, and it's very topical with the World Cup kicking off in a few days. So,
how did you not have a Terrence and Phillip snap little audio snap here? Canada.
Oh, I missed out. Well, the whole point of this jingle, and it's for the audience as well. Well, hopefully we'll change it up every week, and we'll get a new one in. But yeah, so if you got any good sound bites and stuff, send them across, and maybe we'll feature them one day. But yeah, that's my nomination.
Where they go to vote, Millsy?
They go to vote on the Spotify podcast. You scroll down the page, all the votes will be available, and you just select yours, and the vote gets polled up, and we read them out in the next podcast. So yeah, thanks for the vote. Sounds like we've got a few more coming in now. We're down to 20%, so that's good. It's not just 100% and 0-0, which is great. I know. We have got a little sign off. Just we've got a very important person just to approve that message, and I'll play it now. So if Donald Trump can get around it and endorse the podcast, we're making waves here.
Did he pay you unsolicited fees there to play that?
Yeah, a bit of hush money.
34 counts of fraud just to pay you that money or what?
Exactly. Oh, very good. Alrighty, well, we've got our final topic here, and it's quite a good one, hopefully, and it spills over into a few sports. But so the Cricket World Cup, as I said, kicks off in a few days, and it's in USA for the first time, which is interesting. Maybe they're trying to grab a bit of that baseball audience. However, the USA cricket team, as host members, get a default entry into the World Cup, but the USA cricket team is, they're shit, to put it bluntly. So what they've done is they've managed to corral a few sort of under-19s and former New Zealand international Corey Anderson into playing for them, which is not a bad idea, but it's not exactly the areas I'd go shopping if I wanted to get top tier talent. But if you're buying a Ferrari and you don't have the funds, you'll go to the second-hand car dealership, and that's kind of what they've done here and gotten some sort of B-rate players, but it's better than what they had before. So, Bebbo, I'll pose a question to you. Should weaker nations in sports, you can use NRL as an example if you want, be allowed to prop themselves up with athletes from other nations to make them more competitive?
Look, short answer, yes, but there's a lot to break down with it. I don't think they should be able to grab anyone. I mean, like, how the fuck is Harmeet Singh and 90% of their fucking team from India eligible to play for the US outside of a residency thing? How does Corey Anderson, qualify to play for USA outside of a residency thing? I think you've still got to have genuine ties to the country more than I just married someone or literally have lived here for 2 years, because that takes, I guess, the pride of national sports. And I think rugby union's probably diluted this a little bit, so fuck you, union. But I feel like they've diluted international sports to the point where countries are almost looked at like clubs. As long as you're getting an international jersey, you've got a contract to continue to play and get paid to do so. So I do think that they should be able to, but I think it should only go one way. I don't think you should ever be able to come from a weak club to a strong club, because once you open that Pandora's box where you can jump from one country to the next so easily, you're just going to see the rich get richer and stack all the good talent, and the poor get poorer, or the poor get all the 45-year-old has-beens who were once good. David Warner, who knows who he's lining up for? Joe Burns is about to go line up for Italy, So
yeah,
I do see the merit in it.
Batch is already there.
You look at Union in the past, right? The Wallabies have always been somewhat good, but not great, But, they've won World Cups. So they can't be shit.
Previously, they've been very good, yeah.
Right?
Not recently, though. Yeah.
And you've got guys like Patricio Noriega and Tion Strauss, who came over from Argentina and South Australia, respectively, to strengthen what was already a good team. That's ridiculous. They should have. I mean, South Africa. If they lose a player, they're strong anyway. But why are you stealing a good team's player to play for another good team when they are literally just South African? Why is an Argentinian, when Argentina back then were probably the best of the worst, but now they're genuine half-decent team, in that top tier? Why are you stealing players from a team that's trying to develop?
Well,
And
Argentina are categorically better than Australia.
now they are.
Yeah,
But they weren't. But they weren't at the time. They weren't at the time. Not at the time.
But rugby union, it's not that simple. So you can only once you pick your nation, you're stuck with them. But they have recently changed it, and I'll get onto that in a sec. So once you pick a nation, you're stuck with them. You can never play for another nation at international level. You can play for New Zealand 20s and move to England and play for England as long as you you qualify through residency, which is a minimum of 5 years in the country, or your grandparents and closer relatives are from that country. So you do have ties.
Do you think that's okay, though? Do you think residency is a good enough thing? Because
how long have you got to reside in the country before you become a citizen?
Fucking ages. Let's put it this way. Marika Korobidi and Cooper Vuna, just to name a few, there's fucking plenty, have both played for the Wallabies and not their own country of heritage. Granted, Vuna would have had to break into the All Blacks team, but he's Tongan, so let him go boost up Tonga. Allow Marika Korobidi to boost up Fiji. Why are they eligible to play for the Wallabies? They don't need to.
Well, they don't need to, but they want to. What's the difference?
But they fucking shouldn't be allowed to. That's my point. You're skewing the whole, I guess, the whole thing that makes a World Cup great when it comes to World Cups is country versus country, not the best country at recruiting fucking overseas talent. How would you feel if England, the English cricket team, was like just filled with ex-South African players? Like Andrew Strauss or Tony Gregg or Jonathan Trott or Graham Hick or Kevin Peterson, KP, or if they maybe took like some good Barbados-born bowlers like Jofra Archer or something. Would you support that team? Would you actually think that that's an English team, or does it just seem like a fucking piss take?
No, 100%. Well, I think. Where do you draw the line though? Because Billy Vunipola, for example, England number 8, he's retired now, but he went to school in England and he only qualifies for England based on residency. So how long is long enough in the country? Like he's been there since he's been about 12 or even earlier than that. Where do you draw the line? Because there's got to be a line somewhere that's like you live in the country. Otherwise, has he got to go travel the other side of the world to play for Samoa or Tonga, wherever he's from? Like, Millsy, doesn't make sense.
Millsy, if you were immortal, mate, and in 400 years' time you wanted to play for the Wallabies, you still shouldn't be allowed to. Let's put it that way. That's how fucking long. No time is long enough. If
that's crazy because no one from Australia is from Australia then, if you're saying 400 years.
No, I'm saying if from when you've moved here to 400 years' time, so you've been here for fucking 400 years, 400 and so many years, and you'd been in England for fucking, I don't know how many, 20-something, 30, then you're still English. As far as I'm concerned, you're still English. Do you still remember going to fucking primary school? Of course you do. So you went to primary school in England, you're fucking English.
Yeah, but Billy Vunipola did not have that. He was in primary school in England.
Chris is a good example. So when did you move to Australia, Chris?
14.
And you would never consider yourself eligible for an Australian team, would you? No.
100% not. I would never play for Australia.
And that's good. That's how it should fucking be.
I would never play for any other country other than New Zealand. Like, I live here and this is my home, but it's like I was born in New Zealand and that's who I support. All teams I support, New Zealand teams, netball, cricket, rugby, fucking ice hockey, like you name it. They're the teams I support. So I take a different view. I know you opened with you agreed that they should be able to, but and then kind of went full circle and kind of got to where I was. I disagree. I think it should be the country that you're born in, and that's who you play for. And my rationale for that is exactly kind of where we've gone with it. It's you've got to allow these countries to develop as much as they suck or might suck, but then get better. If you keep taking away from them, they're always going to suck. I mean, look at doing some research for this. The Icelandic football team, the Icelandic national football team. So Iceland's got a population of 300,000 people, right? So
famously beat England recently in Euros.
Absolutely horseshit at football, right? Correct. So 330,000 people in 2016 in the Euro 2016. That's where they beat England. And then in the 2018 World Cup, they qualified for the first time. So, that's a country of 330,000 people. So if you kept taking away from these blokes, they didn't make it. The other example is the Belgian football team. So World Cup in 2014, they reached the quarterfinals. In 2016, they reached the quarterfinals of the Euro. And in 2018, they finished third at the World Cup. So again, if you keep taking away from these countries and you keep taking their best players because they've lived in they've lived in France and now they're playing for the French team, or they've lived in, I just think it should be where you're born. That way, it's nice and simple. There's no ifs, ands, or buts. And to your point, Bebbo, it's nationalistic. It's national pride. Like I know what you're saying, Millsy, about Vunipolo. Like I get it. Like you grew up there, you played rugby there, but tough shit. It's just how it is. You unfortunately were born there.
Say he's born in international waters, and then your plane's built in Madagascar. Is the world going to be robbed because you're born in Madagascar, or like your birthplace says Madagascar, but you've lived your whole life and landed in England? Like
that's a good
you're
point,
never going to play international rugby. You're never going to see him on the international stage, and it's just going to rob the world of potentially seeing him do awesome stuff.
That's a good point, but that's up there with Bebbo's 18th man thing. Never going to happen.
Look, I think there should be a young cut-off point, because let's say you move somewhere before 4, and they reckon you don't remember anything in your life before 4 years of age. Well, you've grown up.
What about Terence Howard? What about Terence Howard?
Who the fuck's Terence Howard?
Have you not seen that on Joe Rogan? He can remember being born, coming out of the womb. So
classic.
Okay, righto. So if he's on
classic
Joe
Rogan podcast,
yeah, it's probably on DMA or whatever.
Oh yeah, we'd like to thank Catholic Greens for sponsoring this podcast. Yeah.
Anyhow, look, if you don't remember anything before 4, then okay, and you move to England from Madagascar at 3, you've grown up your entire life English. I'm happy with that. That's fine. But when they sit there and say, "Oh yeah, I moved here at 17. Now I consider myself something else." No fucking way. No
where's
way.
the cutoff? Where do you make the cutoff? But where's the cutoff?
Yeah,
where's
that's
the cutoff?
the point.
4 years of age. 4 years of age.
Okay,
4.
so what happens if it's 4 years and one week?
Ah, well, 4 years. That's it.
Do you know? Well, that's what I mean.
I'm not saying 4 is the exact thing, but there's got to be a black and white.
That's what I'm saying.
There's got to be a black and white.
So okay,
but it can't be
7.
0. I don't think it can be 0. Can't think it can be 0.
But if you make it, that's what I'm saying. It's almost got to be. And
okay,
that's
make it 8. Make it 8.
So I do like what rugby have done. So I prefer the method where it's like a trailing method, where it's 5-year period and then you qualify or whatever. Like maybe that's not long enough. Maybe it's got to be 20 years or whatever. But it doesn't mean that if you're born here a day after your birthday, then you don't get to play. You just got to wait a day longer. Like I prefer that. The other thing is, so with rugby, you can change nation. I said at the top of this, I'll go into it. And this is when you can change nation. You can only change nation. So say if you're Vunipola, right, played for England his whole life, born in Tonga, he can play for Tonga after he hasn't played for England for 4 years, but he can only change back once. So you're not robbing the world of that. Like Israel Folau, for example, hasn't played for Australia, got obviously famously sacked for whatever he did, rightly or wrongly, hasn't played for Australia. He can play for Tonga. The world has not been robbed of watching Israel Folau play rugby because he was born there, and you can go back to play for your country of birth after not playing for 4 years. And that means why it's 4 years is outside of a World Cup cycle. So you can change.
Look, I get that. I get that. And I actually agree with that. But like I'm saying, you can only go backwards. You can only go down to do it, because otherwise the good team's going to be robbing the shit players. Let's say there's a guy that's just lived his whole life in Samoa, right? Lived his whole life in Samoa up to, say, 17. Some prestigious fucking New Zealand rugby union school plucked him out of Samoa, brought him over, brought his family over. He's fucking killed it. He's the best player in Super Rugby. The All Blacks want him. He'd be eligible to play for the All Blacks in no time, right? Why should he play for the All Blacks?
Yeah.
He shouldn't. He should be the face of Samoan rugby union. He should be the guy leading the way for the rest of the Samoans who want to fucking get better. The only reason I think it's okay for him to move there at 6, be eligible for the All Blacks at 21, but still be eligible to play for Samoa, is because that way Samoa's competitive in the World Cup. And he only plays for Samoa if he doesn't get picked for New Zealand. If he goes, and we have the same thing in rugby league, like Jason Tuamalolo, he's turned his back on New Zealand years ago and basically started a whole, well, he opened the floodgates, really, for all these players going, right? Which is fine. That is fine. But if they don't choose their heritage nation as their second tier nation, if they choose that as their first nation, well, there should be no backup option. That is it, right? So I have no issue with them going back. I have no issue with them going back if they don't get picked for their first choice nation, but they should not be able to pick and choose from week to week like Murray Taulagi did last year about which fucking country he wants to play for. So
you can't do that in union.
And if you look at the US cricket team, my biggest concern isn't that they're doing that. My biggest concern is who in the country is actually going to support them when they're like fucking 85% West Indians and 15% Indian.
Well, so this is actually the surprising thing. So Americans actually I didn't know this at all. Apparently it's got a huge following of cricket down in Texas somewhere. Around Dallas. Apparently they've got a new high performance center, which is a few $1 million.
The problem is though, not a single player, and I guess is what Chris was saying, not a single player in that team is going to be from the US, like literally originally from the US. So while you're making the team competitive, and you're getting those people already watching it excited, you're not actually bringing new eyes in. The only way they're going to bring new eyes in is if they start bringing in homegrown talent. Guys that,
actual
is it
American.
not a little bit chicken of the egg,
someone went to university with someone who fucking all of a sudden he's made the US cricket national team. And
but it's a bit chicken of the egg. If they didn't get any of these players in, they would just end up losing by so much it's not even worth
but
it.
at
least they've got a shot of beating a couple of teams now. It's
No,
not wearing USA jerseys.
I'd suggest they cap
Iceland national football team.
Yeah, I suggest they'd cap the amount of
Iceland have
people.
been playing football since day dot, and they had an extremely good crop of players. Like it's a bit of a freak. When they beat England,
they've got
but America would
fuck all. They've got no
America
people.
have zero.
America's got.
I know, but it was just a coincidence.
330 million people. You can't tell me they can't put a cricket side together.
Well, they can't. That's why they got all these players. But that's the thing, though. The factor with America is it's Americans. They're not going to get behind it unless they're doing well.
Yeah, but I think they don't
deserve it. They don't deserve it. They don't deserve we've got Australia, New Zealand, South Africa. Like we get on board and we like, you know what I mean? Like you either support them or don't, and that's the problem. You don't deserve it if you're not going to be prepared to support them. But it goes back to what I was saying about fair weather supporters. Like get on board or don't.
Oh, look, I think it's going to be amazing for America to host a World Cup for a sport that they will be proven to not be the world champions of, because all of the other finals they play in that country, they're always the world champion, like the Major League Baseball, the Super Bowl.
How do you think? How do you think viewership's going to go? How do you think viewership's going to go? How do you think
in America?
Yeah,
I think it'll be horrible. It's horrible.
Yeah, I think it's horrible.
It's a horrible time slot too, for like the countries that do watch it. So
the main reason they're playing in America is and I don't know why they've done this, but I'm not endorsing it. But they have actually built a temporary stadium in New York. Imagine how well that pitch is going to play. But they just want to slice of the baseball revenue. And
yeah, for sure.
That's all. That's the only reason they're doing it, and they've got to give it a go. It's like why did NRL go to play their matches in Las Vegas at the start?
Complete waste of time. Complete waste of time. I had this argument with my mates. They go, "No, it's good for the game." I went, "It's fucking." No one gives a fuck about it. No one.
They didn't even know what rugby it was. They just a lot of them thought it was union they were playing.
Mate, the Rugby Union World Cup's in the US after the next one.
Yeah,
that'll be weird.
You're not going to see immediate results, but doesn't mean you're not planting a seed. So, yeah. I don't know.
But the same with cricket. Hang
on. Go back. Hang on. I want to go back to that point. So, hang on. So, what are you trying to say to me? That are you talking about planting rugby league seeds in the USA?
I'm out.
He's going to do some research.
Now, look, I'd just like to clarify that wasn't a piss break. Coach Belichick and Popovich and I were just drawing our answer up on the whiteboard. So, yes, I am saying that they're going to plant a seed of rugby league into the US, and I'm not saying it's going to take over any time soon, Chris, but it does grab a few eyes every year that they're going to keep going back and doing it. A few more eyes, a few more eyes, a few more eyes. And that's the only way you do it. If you don't go there, if you don't branch out, how are you going to get the viewership.
Yeah, I disagree. I just don't think it's going to get traction in the US. I think we'll be looking back at this and like I good on them for trying. And look, I could be eating my words in 5 years' time as well. But I just don't think it will be. I just don't think the Americans really get it. You know what I mean? Like I don't.
There are better ways. I mean, we're in the 21st century now. That there's so many ways of getting a sport promoted. You haven't got to play it live. With VR headsets and all that shit. You can do something around that. But wasn't 90% of the crowd Australian anyway? Like it was just a whole holiday for.
Yeah, I think the stats.
Don't get me wrong, that increases the atmosphere, so it's great for that. But
who says that Vegas tourism doesn't pay the NRL a good chunk of money just to take games there? Maybe it's a nice business novelty for them.
Yeah, exactly. There's probably more sides to it than we're going to ever be privy to. But so just going back to the cricket residency, because I didn't know this, right? And it's pretty typical for most sports. But a player can qualify, obviously being born in the relevant country, able to demonstrate by his or her possession of a valid passport issued by the relevant country. Well, that's bullshit, because anyone can issue a passport to anyone if they wanted to, just to get a player to play. So that's no sort of time frame required. And then the player is a resident of the relevant country. In other words, the player has resided in the relevant country for a minimum of a minimum of 183 days, so 6 months in each of the immediately preceding 2 years. The player has resided in the relevant country for minimum of 83. So it's a little bit different for male and female players, but essentially, it's in cricket. It's really easy. Just give them a passport and then play.
Different? Why is it different? They're fighting for equality. Why is it different?
No comment.
For equality. It's not the women's fucking soccer team, US soccer team. Mate. They're not fighting for equality.
And Megan Rapinoe.
No, I don't understand. Yeah. Why would it be different? Why would the time bar be different for men and women?
Honestly, I have no. I mean, that whole qualification criteria is just a bit of an odd one, to be honest. Like, why would the qualification? If your country wanted you to play for their country to play sport and represent them, you just give them a passport, irrelevant of how long you've resided there. You know what I mean? Like it's a bit crazy. So that to me seems a bit light on. Maybe even rugby union, according to you chaps, is a bit light on as well. Maybe it should be to 10 years. Is sort of what Chris is alluding to. Maybe Bebbo should be 20 years.
I think it should be at least as long as Elizabeth Fritzl spent in the basement, at least, minimum. But I am more inclined to go with an early age and say that's it, that's your cutoff. If you didn't move to that country, if you weren't in that country by that age, well, you grew up as that. You know what I mean?
What also defines a move? Because have you got to stay in the country for 6 months a year? Or, you go back home for 6 months?
Talking about home.
No, we're talking about fucking proper immigration, mate. Not just going on holidays. Not just fucking... I didn't just go to Ibiza one day and go, that's it, I'm Spanish now. You literally got to fucking live there. You're moved. You have your whole family's moved.
Yeah, no, but has anyone got anything else to say? Because that was a spicy segment. I'm definitely going to tell my friends at the library to listen to the last episode.
Your friends at the library?
Yeah, it's my catchphrase, mate.
Jesus Christ.
Maybe Zia can weigh in next week.
Right? yeah, quite possibly. But yeah, anything for anyone else on that topic, or are we going to wrap things up with our multi?
No, let's move on.
Let's wrap it up, baby.
Cool. All right, cool. All right, we love that one. So, unsolicited financial advice for this week, and we got some news as well. I think someone made an appearance on the leaderboard, didn't they, last week, Bebbo?
I don't know.
Oh, well, I did.
Oh, did you?
So, yeah, just if you didn't remember, mate. Jeremy Doku, the Count Doku, came through for me on the 87th minute, I think, in the FA Cup final in a valiant losing effort. But, yeah, one-shot wonder. So, thank you, Jeremy. All right, we'll go to you, Bebbo. Who are you tipping for this week's multi?
Well, Well, I had a 3-legger last week and 3-leg AFL, and I fell 1 leg short. So I've just dropped a leg off this week and stuck with the same sport. I'm going to take Port Adelaide head-to-head over Carlton and Essendon head-to-head over Gold Coast on the Gold Coast, $3.61.
Cool. That's good. Who have you got, Chris?
Mate, this week I'm going to the UFC 302 this weekend on Sunday, and I'm going to go to the main event with the Diamond, Dustin Poirier versus Makhachev. I'm actually going to go... Look, do I think this is going to happen? I don't know. It's hard, but there's value in it. So I'm going to go the fight to go the distance at $4. I think Dustin Poirier is an absolute... Just a very, very hard man, and I think it's just going to be a war. And typically when you watch a lot of those main events nowadays, you know, a lot of them will go for the 5 rounds anyway because you can kind of count out the first 2 where they're feeling each other out. So I'm going that. I'm going fight to go the distance at $4.
I like it. Well done.
Value.
Nice.
I'm about the value.
Yeah, you don't fuck about, mate. You go above and
Last
beyond
week
what's
was,
required.
Last week was $5, wasn't it, Bebbo?
No, it was
Round up
$4 something. But yeah, you might as well round it up. It was last week was $12,500 to one.
That's more like it. All right, and as a premier tipper in my company's tipping competition from last week, I'll just distribute more than 50% of the winning tip this week for the perfect round. And I've gone for Newcastle Knights, the Penrith Panthers, and Dolphins, all to get the job done over the Bulldogs, Dragons, and Raiders, respectively. Multi that together, it's a 338 for me. So,
right.
What is that combined and power play, Bebbo?
Multi altogether and power played 58, 55 on Sportsbet. And look, for those people that are confused about the little intro to this, the Here Comes the Money intro, we play that for Sportsbet's value because that's who gets all the money when we don't ring our bets each week.
Not this week.
Some of us just win.
We're going to win.
Yeah.
We're hitting this week.
Well, the skin's almost worn off it. So that's us for this episode. Please follow us on our socials. Search for Masturbated Sports on Facebook and Instagram.
Subscribe to us on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, or wherever it is that you get your podcasts.
And most importantly, join us again next episode for some more engaging discussions,
Diverse perspectives,
and to experience the friction of masturbated sports.
And when you're done with what you want to know, you can